Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivartika Acharya Ashtotar Sutta Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivartika Acharya Ashtotar Sutta Srimad His Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Srimad Bagavatam Ki Jai All glories to the Sum devotees Hare Krishna All glories to the Sum devotees Hare Krishna All glories to the Sum devotees Hare Krishna All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 4, Text 35, and then I'll read 36 as well. Atmanam cha Kuru Shreshta Krishnena Manasa Ikshitam Dhyayan Gate Bhagavate Ruroda Prema Vihvalaha Atmanam Chakuru Shreshta Krishnena Manasekshitam Dhyayan Gati Bhagavate Ruroda Prema Vihvalaha Atmanam Chakuru Shreshta Krishnena Manasekshitam Dhyayan Gate Bhagavate Roda Prema Vihvalaha Atmanam Chakru Shrishta Krishnena Manasikshitam Dhyayan Gate Bhagavate Roda Prema Vihvalaha. Please repeat.
Atmanam Chakuru Shrishta Krishnena Manasikshitam Dhyayan Gate Bhagavate Ruroda Prema Vivala
Atmanam Chakru Shrishta Krishnena Manasikshitam Dhyayan Gate Bhagavate Ruroda Prema Vivala.
Atmanam Chakuru Shrestha Krishnena Manasikshitam Dhyayan Gate Bhagavate Ruroda Prema Vihvalaha.
Atmanam Chakru Shrishta Krishnena Manasikshitam Dhyayan Gate Bhagavate Ruroda Prema Vihvalaha. Atmanam Chakru Shrishta Krishnena Manasikshitam Dhyayan Gate Bhagavate Ruroda Prema Vihvalaha. Atmanam, himself. Cha, also. Kuru Shreshta, O best amongst the Kurus. Krishnena, by Krishna. Manasa, the mind. Ikshitam, remembered. Dhyayan, thus thinking of. Gate, having gone. Bhagavate, of the devotee. Ruroda, cried loudly. Prema Vihvalaha, overwhelmed by the ecstasy of love. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Understanding that he was remembered by Lord Krishna while quitting this world, Vidura began to cry loudly, overwhelmed by the ecstasy of love. Vidura was overwhelmed by the ecstasy of love when he understood that Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, thought of him at the last moment. Although he thought of himself as insignificant, he was remembered by the Lord by his causeless mercy. Vidura accepted this as a great favor, and thus he cried. This crying is the last word in the progressive path of devotional service. One who can cry for the Lord in love is certainly successful in the line of devotional service. This is the last verse of the chapter, and it has no purport, so I'll just read this too. Kalindya katibe siddha ahobhir paratar shabha prapadyata swasaritam yatra mitra sato munehi. After passing a few days on the bank of the river Yamuna, Vidura, the self-realized soul, reached the bank of the Ganges, where the sage Mitravan was situated. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 4th chapter, 3rd canto of the Bagavatam, entitled Vidura Approaches Maitreya. Om Agyan Timarandasya Gananjana Shalakya Chakshura Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Vishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadah Mahyam Dadati Swapatantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Takala Kamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shta Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vidam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sabadutam Parejana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shivishakan Vitamshta He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Tina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostite Tapta Kancana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusuti Devi Pranamami Hare Priya Vancha Kapatubhischa Kripa Sindhubi Eva Shaktitanam Bhavnayabhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Putulishmate Bhakti Prakasa Swamin Iti Namane Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Putulishmate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prasharne Nirvashesha Shunyavari Pashtyati Deshatarne Uter Mahadviri Mafpuro Vibor Nirmaya Shiti the Mushapurushaha Bhungti Ganan Shudasha Shudashatmaka Sulanka Shishta Bhagavan Vashamsime. Understanding that he was remembered by Lord Krishna while courting this world, Vidura began to cry loudly, overwhelmed by the ecstasy of love. So it's not actually discussed here, Krishna remembering Vidura. Is either in this verse it comes, it's implied in this verse. I'm just looking at the Sanskrit. Yeah, the only place it comes is in this verse. It's not mentioned, there is no after. Vidura actually approaches Maitreya on the banks of the Ganges. And then before, there's not really so much about what specifically, how Krishna remembered Vidura. So it's not exactly clear. The Acharyas don't make any points with this either. But we can understand at least simply that Lord Krishna somehow thought of Vidura. And Vidura appreciated this. He saw, even though he was considering himself, as Prabhupada says here, insignificant. He thought of himself as insignificant. Although, if you look at it, Vidura did a lot for, he served Krishna in many ways. He served Krishna's devotees in many ways. He was a minister for Dhritarashtra, and he tried many ways to help the Pandavas out, which I won't go into so much detail. But he was quite intimately involved in Krishna's Leela, outside of Vrindavan, of course. Mainly dealings with the Pandavas, but he was also involved in, with Krishna, etc., had dealings with Krishna. So, nevertheless, he thought of himself out of his humility. He was thinking himself as insignificant. And he was feeling very grateful that Krishna, at the time he left this world, he thought of Vidura. It's a pretty special thing, the Supreme Personality of Godhead remembers one. We're supposed to remember Krishna at the time of death, but Krishna, when he left this world, he remembered Vidura. So it gives you an idea of Vidura. Of course, Vidura, it's said here, I think in this verse actually, or maybe the next verse. Yeah, Vidura, the self-realized soul, it comes in the Sanskrit. Is it? I guess that's Prabhupada's elaboration about it. So Vidura is already a self-realized soul. He's Yamaraj. He's a Mahajana. So already he's a great devotee. But out of his humility, he's thinking like this. And also, etc. like this. And so this was his, I guess you could say, qualification for Krishna's thinking of him. When Krishna left, regarding Krishna's leaving, this has been discussed before a little bit. I suppose yesterday's class spoke on this. How Krishna left this world. We have in the Sanskrit yesterday, Deha Nyasam. He gave up. Well, proper translation here is entering the body. It can also be taken as leaving the body. But Krishna didn't renouncing the body. You can take it something like that. But Krishna doesn't leave his body. Krishna and his body are the same. Krishna never technically. And once since he left this world, he wound up his pastimes. He unmanifested his pastimes. He manifested them when he appeared in this world in the prison of King Kamsa, and then he wound his pastimes back up at this section being described here. And the effect this had on the devotees, the effect it had on different people, I'm just connecting some previous verses. It was different. For the animals, it bewildered them. People were like animals. People didn't atheistic demons who don't understand the personality of Godhead. It just bewilders them. That's what was made in the verse, I think, 2 days ago. But for the devotees, what it does, Krishna's disappearance, let me see what Prabhupada translates as. It doesn't come here exactly, but the previous acharyas, they comment that Krishna's disappearance from this world, it has two effects upon devotees, going from the Sanskrit of a previous verse. One is that it increases the love of the devotees because of separation, obviously. Another effect is that it can, and we see that here with Vidura, Krishna's disappearance increased his ecstasy of love for Krishna. The second effect is that it makes the devotees more steady in their devotional service because they come to understand, they understand the real position of Krishna. Obviously, they already understood, but it's fixed within their mind more. They understand that Krishna is eternal, he's always present, and they're never separated from Krishna, even after he winds up his pastimes. Same thing for the spiritual master can be applied and kind of understood through that logic. The spiritual master is always present with us, but specifically when the spiritual master departs, the disciple realizes it more. So similarly too with Krishna, that sort of logic. So these two things, one, it increases the devotee's ecstasy of love for Krishna, and second, it makes the devotees more steady in their own understanding of Krishna and progress in devotional service. So Vidura, we see here, for different reasons, one because the Lord departed, another because Krishna thought of him, we hear about his crying loudly, overwhelmed in the ecstasy of love. At least to my knowledge, I haven't seen, at least within the Mahabharata, I haven't read or remember anything Vidura exhibiting such symptoms up until now, basically. It may be there, but at least it's not so prominent. Maybe some small episode like that. If so, because generally great devotees, Vidura he was already a great devotee. Great devotees generally conceal these symptoms. Generally, they don't cry. They don't cry, what to speak of crying loudly. We see Srila Prabhupada, and whenever he exhibited tears, crying, etc. like that, he generally concealed it for the most part. And when he did do such things, just like, for example, famously, as we've told many times here in Atlanta, when he spoke on that song, Parama Karuna Pavudvijana, he became choked up. He began crying, actually, and he couldn't speak anymore. And he ended the class. He didn't make a big show of it. He didn't advertise himself as an elevated devotee. Many other different instances of Srila Prabhupada like this, but this is every devotee is like that. Every real Vaishnava, he doesn't go around advertising himself, displaying these different symptoms of ecstasy. Although it's what we desire, although it's what's desired by a devotee to develop ecstatic love for Krishna, one doesn't flout it. So similarly too, Vidura is also exhibiting this. Because otherwise people can get misled. In the second canto, there's a famous verse. There's a whole chapter named after it. The change in the heart. And there's this Tadam shasaram hridayam batedam yadgriha yamaner harinama dhiyayahi na vikriyetata yada vikaro nitre jalam gatra rohishu harshaha. Certainly that heart is still framed, which, in spite of one's chanting the holy name of the Lord with the concentration, does not change when ecstasy takes place. Tears fill the eyes, and the hairs stand on end. So the symptom of advanced devotees that when he chants the holy name, you can extend this to other things too, when one contemplates upon Krishna, etc., like that, name, fame, form, pastimes, etc., the heart becomes changed, the heart becomes softened, and tears come to the eyes. Srila Prabhupada, he writes in his purport, I'll just read one paragraph. It's somewhat lengthy, just bear with me, and I'll make points from it. The whole process of spiritual culture is aimed at changing the heart of the living being within the matter of his eternal relation with the Supreme Lord as subordinate servant, which is his eternal constitutional position. So, with the progress of devotional service, the reaction of change in the heart is exhibited by gradual detachment from the sense of material enjoyment by a false sense of lording it over the world, and an increase in the attitude of rendering loving service to the Lord. Vidhi bhakti, or regulated devotional service by the limbs of the body, namely the eyes, the ears, the nose, the hands, and the legs, as already explained herein before, is now stressed herein in relation to the mind, which is the impetus for all activities of the limbs of the body. It is expected by all means that by discharging regulated devotional service, one must manifest the change in the heart. In other words, this change that's being talked about here, this coming to the Prabhupada writes in today's purport, that this is the last word in the progressive path to devotional service, exhibiting these symptoms. Actually, you could take it as technically second to last. Of course, Vidura was absorbed in prema, but even these symptoms, they begin to manifest even at the stage of bhava, ecstasy. So this is to be expected if we're practicing devotional service. And frequently, actually, Srila Prabhupada he would say like this, that it's if you many different statements, particularly in the early days of ISKCON, he would speak about these elevated states of devotional service, and he would reaffirm to the devotees that we come to the point of love for Krishna, feeling for Krishna, crying for Krishna, etc., like this. And he says if there's no such, this is when he wrote this purport, actually. I think it's 68 or 69. And he writes, if there's no such change, the heart must be considered still framed, for it is not melted even when there is the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. We must always remember that hearing and chanting are the basic principles of discharging devotional service, and if they are properly performed, there will follow the reactional ecstasy with signs of tears in the eyes and the steady standing of hairs on the body. These are the natural consequences and are the preliminary symptoms of the bhava stage, which occurs before one reaches the perfectional stage of prema, love of God. So what I was just saying, so these symptoms are to be expected for a devotee who's actually practicing. If we practice Krishna consciousness seriously, if we take to this hearing and chanting the basic principles of devotional service, then we can expect this result. The natural result is that one's heart becomes melted and tears come to the eyes. But the reality is we don't experience that always. Most of the time we don't experience that. Why? Prabhupada gives the explanation. If the reaction does not take place, even after continuous hearing and chanting of the holy name of the Lord, it may be considered to be due to offenses only. That is the beginning of the sandarbha. In the beginning of the chanting the holy name of the Lord, if the devotee has not been very careful about evading the 10 kinds of offenses, at the feet of the holy name, certainly the reaction of feelings of separation will not be visible by tears in the eyes and the standing of the hair on end. The purport goes on, but I'll stop there. So similarly, Vidura, he was feeling ecstasy and separation from Krishna because he was on that stage, on bhava or prema. He was a self-realized devotee. He was actually feeling like this, and these things actually manifested in his character. Unfortunately, we may be on the stage where we're chanting Hare Krishna, we have no such taste for doing so, and these symptoms are at least seem a very, very, very far away. Why this is so is because of offenses in chanting. Offenses are variegated. We're familiar with them. We have classes on them every time an initiation goes on. We're quite familiar with them, and we can recite them, but still yet we commit offenses in chanting the holy name, unfortunately. And this bars us from making an advancement of Krishna consciousness and developing our feelings for Krishna, actually. Of course, some things are easier. At least for Westerners, it's quite easy not to equate the name of Lord Vishnu with that of Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva. It's quite easy to, it may be somewhat difficult to avoid blasphemy of devotees of the Lord if we become familiar with devotees of the Lord. It's quite hard to chant the name with full attention, as is one of the offenses. Particularly, this is what holds up most of us, this attentive chanting, inattentive chanting, we'll say. Inattentive chanting is the root of all the other offenses committed against the holy name. And you could say if it's the root of those things, then it's the root of why we don't experience these symptoms, actually. Although the chanting, you can hear chanting of Srila Prabhupada, and you can hear maybe at least mine, your own chanting. The chanting externally may sound the same. Even you may be pronouncing the syllables the same. But the difference is in the quality, and the difference is in the realization of the devotee, one's consciousness. So one can go on uttering the external syllables of the Hare Krishna mantra, and definitely you should do that. It's not that you leave out syllables or you forget to chant parts of the Hare Krishna mantra or you just mispronounce them. But the real thing is chanting with attention and chanting with devotion. And just one point, let me see. Yeah, when Srila Prabhupada was questioned on this, Giriraj Swami, he asked Srila Prabhupada that this was in India in 1971, I think. Srila Prabhupada was lecturing for the first time on the 6th canto in the Bagavatam, in the section of Ajamil. And there's many verses there that describe the glories of the holy name. And Srila Prabhupada would constantly talk about this point of chanting. And Giriraj Swami, he asked, Brahmachari at the time, he asked Srila Prabhupada, I want to chant attentively, but it seems as if automatically it's just my natural state is to be inattentive. It's very hard to chant attentively. In other words, the case for quite a lot of us. And so Srila Prabhupada, he replied to Giriraj Swami that that's not your fault. If you're chanting inattentively, if you try to chant attentively, but inattention comes, that's not your fault. Because you're inexperienced. It's just like if you try, I don't know, so many things. If you say you're trying to, if you know a mridanga beat, you kind of half know it, and you're trying to play it. Sometimes you can play it properly, sometimes you screw it up. That's not your fault necessarily. You're trying, you're doing your best. It's just because of lack of experience, you're unable to do so properly. So similarly too, it may be such that we're trying to give attention to the holy name. We're trying to chant attentively, but due to inexperience, we can't chant attentively. Due to inexperience, our mind leads us astray. But the process of Krishna consciousness gives us that experience just as by practicing anything, practicing a mridanga beat, practicing singing, practicing a song, practicing anything in this world. If you practice it enough, you become expert at it. So similarly too, the more we practice Krishna consciousness, this vidhi bhakti that Srila Prabhupada was talking about, if we practice this devotional service in practice, sometimes it's called sadhana bhakti. The sadhana bhakti leads to perfection. Of course, mercy is also there, that's a technical point, but by chanting every day and giving effort to our chanting, even if we're attentive, trying to be attentive, then Krishna will help us along the way and we'll become actually attentive. And then our chanting, the quality of our chanting will increase. And then we'll notice then these things will come about, this change of the heart that's being described. These symptoms that Vidura are experiencing will also come to experience. Otherwise, what's the point of Krishna consciousness? Why are we here if it's just some far-off thing that we'll never attain to? If the point of Krishna consciousness is to come to the position of Vidura, to come to the position our acharyas are offering us. It's not that, although Srila Prabhupada definitely, he's a very elevated, extremely special devotee, it's not that we can't attain the love of Krishna that Srila Prabhupada, he himself possesses. Of course, everyone has their own individual relationship, but the quality of being absorbed in an ecstatic love for Krishna, that's open to everyone. That's what Prabhupada came to give. That's what Lord Chaitanya came to give, and that's what Krishna came to give. That's what Krishna is giving to Uddhava, and that's what he wanted Uddhava to speak to others. This developing this ecstatic love for him, being always absorbed in love for Krishna. So yeah, if we keep ourselves in the process of Krishna consciousness, these things will come about. It just requires some time and requires sincerity. Krishna can see the sincerity of the devotee. The example is always given, just like you stick an iron rod into fire, so similarly it becomes fire. It takes some time. Immediately it doesn't become fire. It takes some time. But one, you could say, qualification of this is that iron rod becomes fire in so long there isn't any impediment between the iron and the fire. In other words, if you encase that iron with a fireproof socket or something like that, the iron won't become fire. So similarly too, if we're encased by offenses, we won't become advanced in devotional service. Another example, to put it better, electricity same thing, Srila Prabhupada would give the example of the powerhouse. Electricity is coming here, these lights are on because we're connected to the powerhouse. But if there's an obstruction somewhere along the way, if there's some insulation, just like if you touch some wires, just like we have wires plugged in all over the place, it's electrocuted. There's electricity running through there, but because there's a sheath, because there's insulation there, you don't get the effect. So similarly too, if we maintain offenses in devotional service, which are like sheaths or insulation for us actually, for the real prema, for the real taste of devotional service, we won't be hooked up to the powerhouse of Krishna consciousness. So those that commit offenses become something like a bad conductor of devotional service. There may even be some devotional service there, just like some materials are more conductive, some materials are less conductive. Metal is extremely conductive. Water is extremely conductive. This thing is not so conductive. It may be low conductive. It can have some static electricity. But static electricity versus electricity coming from a powerhouse is very, very different. So, similarly, based upon our degree of freedom from offenses, to that degree we become better conductors of devotional service. Mercy is also there. We can also be imbued with mercy, spontaneously make advancement in devotional service, though that's quite rare. And there's an imitation of devotional service. Some people, even though their heart hasn't melted, their heart, as it is being described here, although their heart isn't melted, they display symptoms as if it were melted. They cry as if their heart was melted. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in relation to this verse I just quoted, this still-framed verse, so the verse says, that heart which chants and doesn't cry, basically, is still framed. But we see advanced devotees, they chant and they don't cry. They hide their own crying. They hide their ecstasy. So he explains that, well, then you should take this verse this way, that those people who cry, but their heart isn't melted, their heart is still framed. In other words, if somebody's imitating crying, imitating ecstatic symptoms, but actually their heart isn't softened by doing so, in other words, they're acting as if a prakrita sahaja, actually those people have still framed hearts. Those people have hearts like iron. So there are those who imitate these ecstatic symptoms. There's others who may not necessarily possess the qualification for these ecstatic symptoms, but still display them. You see this in the Nectar of Devotion. There's technical terms used there, chaya, abhas, like this. Sometimes we see people just coming into the association of a very elevated devotee, they begin to cry themselves. Although they don't necessarily possess love for Krishna, spontaneously they begin to cry, being induced by another pure devotee. So there are also symptoms like this. This is chaya sattvika bhava, technical things. So these things are also there. But what Vidura is experiencing here is completely pure. Of course, there's different grades of ecstatic symptoms, but we're after the real thing, I guess you could say, developing that real thing, meaning we want to develop the love for Krishna, and then everything else comes from there. So devotees, pure devotees, they feel for Krishna, they love Krishna, and they cry out of ecstasy for Krishna, and Krishna also cries out of ecstasy for his devotees. There's one verse, there's many verses, actually, but just one that comes to mind. Kunti, she prays Gopi Adadit Vaikrita Kasidamatava Adit Dashashru Kaninanjana Sambramaksham Vaktram Niniya Bhayabhavanaya Stitasya Samam Vimoheti Bhir Apiyed Pipeti. My dear Krishna, Yashoda took up a rope to bind you when you committed an offense, and your perturbed eyes overflooded with tears, which was washed by the mascara from your eyes, and you were afraid, although fear personified is always afraid of you. This sight is bewildering to me. So devotees cry out of ecstasy for Krishna. Krishna cries out of ecstasy for his devotees. Krishna, out of love for his devotees, he even cries for them. In many different circumstances, this is just one. Here, Krishna is exhibiting such crying out of fear. Out of fear, Mother Yashoda, Krishna is crying. He's not actually afraid, or he may be actually afraid. Fear personified is fear. Fear personified is scared of Krishna, but Krishna is scared of Mother Yashoda. Although he's the Lord of the universe, and he's infinitely greater than Mother Yashoda, still he exhibits as if he was scared for... actually, he feels like that, being scared of Mother Yashoda. And he cries out of that fear. So the devotees cry for Krishna, and Krishna cries for the devotees. Yiri tamam prabhadete tam statai bhajamiham. It's reciprocal. Devotional service is reciprocal. Of course, in a little bit different way, but that point is there. So yeah, we are chanting this Damodar Ashtakam now. The same point comes there, that because Mother Yashoda was imbued in love for Krishna, out of her pure, unalloyed love for Krishna, Krishna exhibited such pastimes. So, anyway, time is getting short, but I'll just get to the point. I'll speak a little bit on Kartik month. I don't have a whole lot to say. just a few technical points, just explaining for those who may be unfamiliar. So, two principal things we do during the month of Kartik. When we chant this Damodar Ashtakam, why? Our acharyas say so. Rupa Goswami, he says so in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Nectar devotion we have. You can read about it there. And as well as in Hari Bhakti Vilas, there's an extensive section, something, I forget what it's called, Kartika Mahima, something like that, the glories of Kartik Mas, describing the different practices one should practice during the month of Kartik, and the benefit one gets for doing so. And specifically is prescribed that one should offer a ghee lamp, a lamp to Lord Damodar, typically done in the evening, and then also daily recite this Damodar Ashtakam. These two things are also affirmed, same thing in the Nectar devotion. Srila Prabhupada gave this to his disciples. He didn't always follow it, actually. Sometimes, for example, we hear Lokanath Maharaj, he describes in one book, I think it was 74, 75, a Vrindavan festival. In Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada just didn't observe Kartik in 1 month. But generally, Srila Prabhupada introduced this in his society and expected, he wanted his disciples to follow these things because of the benefit. Generally, we hear that devotional service is multiplied in the month of Kartik. Anyway, I'll get to that in a second. So this Damodar Ashtakam, meditation upon this Damodar Ashtakam. Meaning of Damodar Ashtakam is available in so many ways. It's quite, in one sense, it's self-apparent because Satyavati Muni, this Damodar Ashtakam that comes in the Padma Purana, written by, Satyavrata Muni. So the purport is quite clear, just from the translation itself. We're reading every day. I won't read it here. The Krishna is one thing is that Lord Damodar's form is worshipable because it's in this form and there's other forms manifest in Vrindavan. He's a Vrindavan Leela. He manifests a higher grade of devotional service, a higher grade of love that's not available to those whose love is imbued, with awe and reverence, something like that. I forget the English translation. So for those who are existing on the platform of Aishwarya, Krishna reveals his loving pastimes, and he's revealing those intimate pastimes to those devotees devotion is imbued with intimacy, something like that. So Krishna, his form is worshipable because it's a very intimate form of Krishna. Mother Yashoda chasing Krishna, you won't find these pastimes of Vaikuntha. It's inconceivable to those residents of Vaikuntha that he who is the same Vaikuntha Nath is being chased by Mother Yashoda and being specifically bound by Mother Yashoda. Krishna being bound by Mother Yashoda, the acharyas make the point, she tried to do so, but she was two fingers too short. These 2 fingers represents 2 things. One, the mercy of the Lord. Second finger, the effort of the devotee. And when these 2 things are there, that can bind Krishna. Krishna is bound by the love of Mother Yashoda. This point is all made in the Damodar Ashtakam. So this is a meditation we have daily upon Lord Damodar. Only in Goloka does Krishna display his most splendid pastimes, his most elevated pastimes, and he displays that he's bound by, not by, principally by love, actually. Regarding Kartik month itself, just a few points. Well, I'll just make it quick, actually. We hear that generally, it's discussed generally, that devotional service is multiplied in the month of Kartik. It's true. It's not necessarily everything. There's specific items which are multiplied, just like it's mentioned in the Kartik Mahima by Sanatana Goswami, that offering obeisances is multiplied this many times, offering arati is multiplied by this many times, chanting this, that, etc. Practically, we do these things every single day. So, although the result may be increased in Kartik month, and different devotees take up different vows like that, and it's good. That's generally prescribed. You see our acharyas, they write like that. They've taken different vows, self-made vows for Kartik. Of course, there's the general vrata we should observe. Then there's other ones. Some, of course, there's, for those who are observing strict chaturmasya, there are those things. We abstain from taking urdal within this month, and we also observe these 2 items of chanting and offering a ghee lamp. There's other things. Some people go to Mathura, Vrindavan, etc. during this time. There's recommendations like that within Scripture. One's devotional service is multiplied greatly for doing so. and many devotees do so now. So the result is there, but we're not so much concerned with it, actually. Srila Prabhupada, when asked about the significance of the month of Kartik by one disciple, actually, to be honest, frankly, Srila Prabhupada didn't speak much about Kartik. There's only a couple instances in his book about the month. He only mentioned it once in a lecture on this verse I just quoted in New York, briefly. And then when a disciple actually wrote Srila Prabhupada asking about the significance of Kartik month, Srila Prabhupada replied like this. You have asked about the specialness of the month of Kartik. He wrote Kartikeya because I think the disciple wrote Kartikeya, but with the month of Kartik. And the answer is that it is a special inducement for persons who are not in Krishna consciousness to perform some devotional service. For persons who are doing nothing in Krishna consciousness, it is an indirect inducement to take the devotional service and an earnest seriousness. Every moment is for persons who take the devotional service, every moment is Kartik. In this connection, there is a good example that sometimes a store gives special concession to attract new customers. But those who are already customers, there's no need of a special sale. They will purchase at any cost if they know the import and the value of the goods. Similarly, those who are pure devotees do not aspire for any concession, and out of spontaneous love try to engage themselves in devotional service 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, without any stoppage. So devotional service during Kartik is multiplied, but we don't really care so much. Because we do it every single day anyway. We have Mangalarti every single day. We come, we offer obeisances to the deities every single day. We chant 16 rounds every day. All these things already, we're reading Srimad Bagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, etc. like this. We're hearing about Krishna, associating with devotees every single day. We're residing within a temple. Already we're observing all these things every single day. A result may be there, a result may not be there. We may get a result that's multiplied 1,000-fold. We're not so much concerned. Srila Prabhupada, he said, don't bother whether, in a separate letter, don't bother whether you will be spiritually advanced or not. Just take the spiritual master, the word of the spiritual master, and carry it forward. The real thing is to execute the order of the spiritual master. At the end of the day, if we stick to this, that's the main thing. Don't bother whether you'll be spiritually advanced or not. You can follow all these Kartik things. It's not that we don't. Our acharyas did. They recommended it. How about that word? They recommended doing so. They gave these things. It's not necessary. Generally, this month, it's as Srila Prabhupada is explaining, it's a concession for those who are not engaged in devotional service. And you see, in Vrindavan, there's many devotees that go there during Kartik. There's also many non-devotees, or you could say pseudo-devotees who also go there. It inspires them in their devotional service. Many people, you see, they tend to come to a temple during Kartik Mas, particularly among Indians, because they have some sort of idea of the significance of the month. So for people like this who have no idea of the importance of devotional service, Kartik is important. For those who engage 365 days every year in devotional service, it's not so important. Srila Prabhupada, just like the same example, for one who shops in a store regularly, a sale doesn't really matter. Just like, to give a bad example, we shop with Amazon. We buy stuff from Amazon. Okay, Amazon may have a sale. Whether they have a sale, whether they don't have a sale, we buy what we need from Amazon. So similarly too, we always execute Krishna consciousness. So this is just a little bit on Kartik Mas and a little bit on symptoms of ecstasy that Vidura is going through. So I can end my class here, and we have like 9 minutes. So I can take anything anybody has, or yes. Yeah, you can say it. I can repeat it into the microphone, maybe.
I guess we'll see how time goes. So one question I have is just on topic of like making offenses.
Yeah.
So like there's like one school of thought that as long as you're making offenses, specifically within chanting, then you're not making any advancement in Krishna consciousness, so you can't make any. So my question is, so how much do we like emphasize that and focus on that? And is that really like the sole thing that like we should be focusing on, like in Krishna consciousness, just chanting?
Yeah. Well, I'll repeat the question because something get transmitted. So there's a school of thought that says that as long as you're making committing offenses in devotional service, you don't make as long as you're committing offenses in chanting, you don't make progress in Krishna consciousness. Well, one thing that's not entirely true, you do make, Prabhupada said exactly the opposite, that offenses become cleared by chanting, not otherwise. There's no other way to... Of course, different offenses are cleared differently. Vaishnava aparadha is cleared differently. That's not cleared by chanting necessarily. But if we can't make advancement of Krishna consciousness because we're committing offenses in chanting, then there's a very, very big problem, because that's almost like a catch-22 where you can't make any. In other words, if you have to chant purely to clear. In other words, how can you make advancement in Krishna consciousness? So one thing is that we may be chanting impurely, but those by practice everything is rectified. Just like I was giving the example, inattention is cured just by further practice in chanting. Experience comes through like that. I know what you mean in a different sense. Some people emphasize that like chanting is the be-all, end-all of devotional service, and if you're not chanting Shuddha Nam, everything else you're doing in devotional service may as well go to hell. Well, to one degree, it's not wrong to say like that. It's not that we just slur 16 rounds, get it out of the way, and then like just engage in devotional service throughout the day. You can't say it's devotional service. It's really Rajaguna to do so. At the same time, it's not necessarily that somebody is chanting. So much focus is given to chanting purely to the neglect of practical devotional service. You see what Srila Prabhupada discussed, mainly he was discussing practical engagement in devotional service. He would talk about also, he wouldn't neglect the fact that chanting purely, avoiding offenses, but most of the time he was emphasizing expanding the Krishna consciousness movement, service to the spiritual master, etc., things like this. So both things go hand in hand. Personally, I feel like Srila Prabhupada gave more emphasis to other aspects of the devotional service, and he more emphasized that purification comes about through preaching, more than just by one's own personal chanting. And I feel like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta also emphasized that. It's not that we say our own personal chanting goes to hell. Definitely not that. We also try to cultivate that and improve on that. But of course, there is different moods in devotional service and different interpretations, and different devotees have their own approaches. It's just my own understanding of what Srila Prabhupada gave is more you say like engaged form of devotional service, and simultaneously called becoming free from offenses, but not the be-all, end-all. Srila Prabhupada gave so many classes on the Bagavatam, for instance, and how many times did he talk about developing love for Krishna? You're not the body, you're a servant of Krishna. Proportionately to the amount of times he said we have to avoid offenses is very, very, very less. Maybe seeing the level his disciples were at, but just observing that. So that's kind of my thoughts in that matter.
Okay, I had one more question, but just as far as chanting goes, like, you know, with like offenses and stuff like that. So we just, I mean, that's obviously for the holy name, but like, where, like, obviously those instructions are given to like chant the holy name and like focus to be attentive, but like how much do we like take that into other aspects, and do we consider like, okay, like if I'm doing Harinam, is that like also like, you know what I mean, like chanting, if I'm like giving class or hearing class, does that like fall within that realm? If I'm like doing service, is that all? Because we see like Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur would,
saying.
Yeah, and just in general, like, do we like, is there like a line that, okay, like this is like chanting, like this holy name, this is chanting, and then like this is like not chanting. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like how is that like broken up?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Well, one thing that immediately comes to my mind is Shrutakirti Prabhu. He said to Srila Prabhupada, like, I'm paraphrasing him roughly, is like, I'm engaging in your service, but practically I don't feel any love for you. All these other disciples, it seems like they have love for you, but I don't feel any love for you. It was amazing he said that actually to Srila Prabhupada. But Srila Prabhupada replied, the fact that you're doing the service, that means there's love there. You may not have to say, like, I love you. It may not be some sort of gushy feeling in the heart, but that service in itself is symptomatic of love. So similarly, it may be, so to answer the question more specifically, say you're going on Harinam, so you're chanting, you may be doing so a little bit mechanically. Now, obviously, even in Harinam, you can commit offenses against the holy name, and there's definitely a difference in the Harinam between a new bhakta that's coming in, Srila Prabhupada's chanting publicly. But at the same time, Krishna, he sees the effort and he sees what's going on there. One may be chanting mechanically in Harinam because of the lack of taste, because of an intention like that, but simultaneously he may be benefiting many people because he's chanting publicly. So there's many different aspects. That's why specifically Sankirtan is very beneficial. It's more beneficial and you make more advancement than your own japa because you're also benefiting other people. Even though your own chanting may be impure, you're helping others hear the Hare Krishna mantra. So that's one consideration with that. As to other aspects of devotional service, engaging in the service but kind of like doing so mechanically or doing so like half-heartedly, as I understand it, that's kind of like the import of the question. That's also there. Yeah, you can do it like that. Moods in the devotional service. What is that? Advancement of Krishna consciousness depends on the attitude of the follower. So one's attitude towards the service he's doing. One be doing Harinam and feeling like, oh, I don't want to do this, or anything, cooking, cleaning. The attitude is just garbage. Still, Krishna appreciates the effort, but the attitude is really the main thing. So yeah, there's things like that as well. One may be so many things. One may be doing externally deity worship or cooking, but if one isn't attentive, then the service itself may be spoiled, which is not good. One may be dressing the deity wrongly, putting some decoration wrongly, putting some spice in that's not the right spice, putting salt instead of sugar, as has happened in Srila Prabhupada's time. So things like that. So they can also, in summation, yes, but it's complicated. There's aspects like different ways. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
That's my understanding of it, at least.
Yeah. Is your Suresh on the phone? Or?
He deleted. I don't think he wanted.
Oh, you didn't want to say anything?
He retried Jason's question.
Okay.
You have something more?
Somebody else does. I mean, it's like...
Well, I can go. Do any of the men have something? Mataji's, anything? Okay, I'll take hers then.
Yeah.
And then we'll end after that.
So, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. The mic's not working, is it?
I can hear you as long as the main thing is the phone mic. That's
Okay.
working, so you can just speak.
So, in you're making this point about in the Damodarastakam
Yeah.
prayers, how Krishna says he's only conquered by devotees whose pure love is imbued with intimacy.
Yeah.
And so I was just wondering, like, if it's a selfish motive to desire, like, to have that mood within devotional service, because it seems like if you look at, like, devotees within Vaikuntha who have on reverence, like, on one hand we should be satisfied with our position in the spiritual world, but then it seems like the most fulfilling
Yeah.
is to be in that intimate mood.
Yeah, it's not wrong to feel like that. A few points. It's not wrong to feel like that. If you want that position in the devotional service, that's not a material desire. I mean, if we're, of course, we don't necessarily know our position within the spiritual world, but to aspire like that is not necessarily impure. I would say. And just a subsidiary point is even devotees in Vaikuntha, they're not dissatisfied with where they're at. Even though there's higher levels of devotional service, Hanuman, for instance, is perfectly happy and completely blissful in being a servant of Lord Rama. But other devotees may not necessarily be so satisfied with just being pure servitor bhav. So to want to come to those higher levels is not necessarily bad. That's what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to specifically give us. To desire to avail of the gifts that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is giving us is not such a bad thing in devotional service. I mean, that's why we're here. We're here because we want to join Krishna and go Lokam Vrindavan. You can also go to Vaikuntha if you want. You may desire like that, but it's not a bad thing to desire the intimate devotional service with Krishna. That's ultimately what we're trying to develop here, or we're trying to develop feeling and love for Krishna, to enter into those relationships like that. So
if, like, a devotee, like, we all have our position in the spiritual world, but
Mhm.
we're under Lord Chaitanya, who has given us that. Is it that, like, all of us are going back to Goloka Vrindavan? You know, like if our position's already given.
Hard to say if we don't know the position. Generally, to give a simple answer to that, generally within Gaudiya Sampradaya, generally acharyas, generally the specialty of it, you can see, let's say like this, is conjugal love. That's Madhurya Rasa. It's specifically what Lord Chaitanya came to give. You see other Sampradayas, they also have Vatsalya Rasa. Sakya Rasa a little bit less. Definitely Dasya Rasa is there. Even Sri Vaishnavism is almost characterized by the whole thing. Of course, there's even within them, there's different aspects, but the specialty of the Gaudiya Sampradaya is conjugal love, and most of our acharyas are situated within that relationship. Maybe not all of them. We don't necessarily completely know. So it's not necessarily that one. Different devotees may have different destinations. It's hard to say at this point because we don't know our position in the spiritual world. That's revealed to us. And yeah, it's not impossible for one to be absorbed in Lord Chaitanya's movement and also desire to go to Vaikuntha. It's not impossible to desire to be a servant over Lord Ram, Lord Varaha, etc. So many different things. It's a wide net that Lord Chaitanya has cast. So, there's, succinctly, that. And like I was saying, regarding desiring Swarup, I'll just make one point with that. Generally, it's not that we have a Swarup, we have a spiritual form, and that spiritual form generally, it is what it is. So, what we're looking for actually is that spiritual form. Now, it's hard to say when we're materially conditioned, oh, I want to be a cowherd boy because we're infected by material desires, anarthas, aparads. So we don't necessarily have a clear conception of a spiritual form. But when we actually become spiritually realized, it's not necessarily that we're even necessarily, I guess you could say, desiring a spiritual form. That is our spiritual form. That is our relationship with Krishna. That's naturally how it works out. Like that. It's not necessarily something that we have to get because we already have it. It's covered over by these material coverings. We just have to get rid of the material coverings, and then we'll realize the relationship we already had with Krishna. Does that make sense? It's a little technical point, but yeah. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, it's too late, 8:35. Otherwise, it goes on so long. Okay, Srimad Bagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Sorry, otherwise it's like 8:45 every Sunday.
Did Prabhupada say that? Do you know I said that 99% of spiritual advancements come from chanting? They said Prabhupada said that. I don't think Prabhupada said